Well, today on the Dead Sibling Society, it's a great name there, we are joined by a special guest, aren't we, Gracie? Who is it?
It is Spencer Matthews. Thank you very
Welcome,
much for being
Spencer.
here.
Hello, everyone.
Spencer, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
You've just cycled in, and I feel sweaty having walked in, so I'm very jealous of your athleticism.
Walking was probably easier than cycling was probably easier than the walk.
And Spencer, so today we're not just talking about cycling, we're talking about death. And all things death.
Indeed. Good, yeah. Nothing like a bit of death chat to kick the day off.
But can you just tell us a little bit about your experiences with that awful D word?
Sure. I lost the primary death that I suppose I've suffered in my life so far has been the death of my brother Michael when I was 10 years old. I'll always be quite thankful for the fact that I was 10, because I was never really able to fully understand it at that time, particularly. And the grief process came later for me at a more mature stage of my life. So it was, if there is a silver lining, that would be it. I kind of had these childlike, whimsical nature around the whole thing that I never truly kind of understood it or believed it. You know, I always assumed that what I was being told was wrong. We never were able to find his body, so he technically would be lost, you know. And as a kid, that was what I hung my hat on, the fact that he was lost temporarily, not dead. You know, even at his memorial service, there was the absence of a body. So to me, you know, doing my reading at his memorial service, in the back of my mind, I thought that I would see him again. And obviously time passes and you realize that that's an impossibility. But I wasn't hit in the same way that my parents and other siblings were. They were obviously more mature at the time and understood the reality of the situation far faster than I did.
Because what was your childhood like growing up then? Were you really close with your brother? What was it all like?
I'm one of the luckiest people in the world when it comes to childhood and privilege. You know, I've always had what feels to me to be a very loving family.
And as we learned earlier, an Arga too.
An Arga, yeah.
I grew up with an Arga.
Grew up with an Arga, there you go. No, so just in a kind of completely monetary sense, I know that's not what you were talking about. I felt, and I know it sounds a bit lame, but I felt very rich in love, you know, all of the time as a kid. Never really understood the difference, to be honest, between you know, my friends that had less or more, or, you know, it was never really on the cards. As I don't think children really think that way. Felt like I had really loving parents who were always around. My siblings were also always around. We all lived together. You know, in Cornton, which you probably won't have heard of. It's a really small town just outside of Newark. And if you haven't heard of Newark, that's near Nottingham.
Heard of that one.
But, you know, it was, I'll always consider myself incredibly lucky to have the childhood that I had. You know, it felt really like it couldn't have been much better. Obviously, with the exception of bits and bobs that happened to you as a kid, and of course Mike's death, which was a bit of a turning point for the family. You know, we've never been exactly as we were before his passing, although, you know, we are a kind of head down, you know, crack on. Let's see how this might have a positive impact. You know, this obviously comes later. At the time of the death, there was a lot of grieving from family members, but I've certainly always hoped to use Mike's death as an opportunity to better myself, maybe, do more interesting things with my life. Kind of in the back of my mind, I'm kind of strangely wanting him to be proud of certain things.
Why'd you say strangely?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I don't know, because obviously he's not here to witness any of it. He's not here to be around it. But I guess that it shifted slightly. I suppose children want their parents to be proud of them deep down, whether or not, you're willing to admit that, having people in senior positions that you are supposed to look up to feeling proud of you as part of achievement, I suppose. Well, certainly feels that way for me. And in some of my kind of darkest times, has always felt that Mike is there. And by darkest times, I mean, I had a really turbulent relationship with alcohol for most of my adult life, really. Always been really reluctant to put that down to Mike's death. Although, you'd have therapy, and therapists will tell you that, well, of course that experience was really traumatic, so that could in fact lead to you being the way you are. I've always hated that as a concept. It's I feel like despite having a lack of control of my alcoholism for many years, it was ultimately my decision. I never felt I had a lack of control, but I didn't feel like it was a disease or an illness. Do you know what I mean? I was making those decisions to go out and not make much of myself and drink myself to oblivion. And it's only towards the end of that cycle that it felt problematic. It was quite fun for a long time.
Yeah.
It only started to feel like a problem when I met Vogue.
Right.
And, Vogue is not a big drinker by any means. She was disappointed when I called her a binge drinker on the podcast. She's a binge drinker in the sense that when she drinks, she'll drink, you know, but like that's
It's
quite
sporadic.
rare.
Yeah.
So we don't drink, I hardly ever drink anymore. I had a long period of complete teetotal abstinence, just under 4 years. Now I will have the odd drink.
Yeah.
I feel in complete control of that. Can be quite enjoyable, whatever. Like it's no longer this like monster under my bed style thing that I feel could control me. And Vogue's similar. So Vogue will have the odd drink, but when she has the odd drink, she'll have a few drinks. Her father is dead now, but he drank, quite a lot. And I think she's always had alcohol around her in her life. Probably part of what drew her to me initially. Because we had a really fun time, and then it wasn't long before she was pregnant with Theodore, our first child. And in that time, obviously, she didn't drink at all, and my drinking kind of carried on as normal. And it was almost like there was a spotlight shined on it, because all of a sudden I didn't have her joining in ever, and it became a bit of a there's a chance I could lose all of this if I don't get a grip on this. So I went to Total for a while and started CleanCo, which is one of my businesses, and
good bit of promotion there.
There you go.
We'll all buy
spirits. Yeah, best
15% off by saying Dead Sibling Society.
There we go. Yeah, you heard it here. No, and so just my life has changed an awful lot since being with her. She's an incredibly strong woman that I've looked up to since the moment I met her, and she makes it very possible to be a better person just being kind of married to her, which is great. So I feel like we've both grown and evolved and come a really long way since meeting each other. And she's strangely, just to link it back to Michael, and death, which is what we were talking about before I went on that. Right, I'm a podcast DC, so I can just I could just talk. By the way,
well, that's great.
Just sitting here, it's great.
She has always had a really deep affection for Mike, and it's almost
Never met him, obviously. Though.
No, never met him, but we have pictures of him in the house,
Yeah,
and Theodore and Gigi are both quite curious about him, and obviously we made Finding Michael, which she was very supportive of. Not everyone would
Even
be comfortable.
if she gave birth while you weren't there.
Yeah, no, I was there for the birth. I left. I left.
But that was a possibility, wasn't it?
I think it was 3 days later. I left for 5 weeks, which is rough. But I think she was as desperate as we were to bring Mike home, and knew the significance of that for our family. But Mike brings tears to her eyes, and like she'll cry on his birthday, and she'll cry, she's never even met him. So there's this strange connection with the two of them almost. And
that must be lovely for you, though.
He would have loved her.
Yeah.
And she would have loved him. And when I'm in when I do these ultras and and stuff and push myself physically to the limit, it's the two of them that are the most prominent in my mind. Weirdly, it's always her and him.
Do you think you sought approval, like almost Mike's approval? You looked for a woman that Mike would like, or do you think that's just come about?
I think that's just. I think ultimately Mike would have supported any decision that I would have made, with who I married. But I think our whole marriage in general has been a really beautiful thing. It didn't necessarily have to pan out because I'm a very different person to the man she married. Like I wouldn't even recognize myself. So she's essentially had all of that change, and change isn't necessarily always good. So I think it's been a real stroke of luck that we have ended up being kind of more in love than we were when we got married. Now, our relationship is better now than it's ever been. And, there's been, I think a good marriage comes with compromise, from both sides, and change and evolution and development. And I don't know, I feel very lucky.
I said to Gracie recently, I need a relationship counsellor for my non-existent relationships. I
You
feel
do.
like I'm getting it
Yeah,
now.
you are.
It's great. I'm just sitting back enjoying it. So bringing it back to Mike. Can you? Not everyone listening to this will be as aware of your story. Can you just explain to us how he went missing? I guess people could just go onto Disney Plus and they'll have a great viewing there. But could just explain to us what happened?
Sure. So Michael would have been Michael was the youngest Brit at the time in 1999 to reach the summit of Mount Everest. Bear Grylls being a year older than him, having done it the year before. That's not at all why Mike had no interest in that whatsoever. He was just a very gifted climber who loved it. Like, it's just what he loved. He was a very talented trader as well. Had experienced pretty significant success at a really young age on the trading floor. Jim Carney, his old boss, is still a good friend of ours, and we see him every couple of years around New Year. And he always tells me just how incredible Mike was at trade. He had a natural gift for business trading. Sorry, it's kind of irrelevant to what you asked, but just trying to paint a broader picture of
nice
Mike.
to know
He
about him.
wasn't just some kid who was, out there for the thrill. He was a pretty well-rounded, great. Anyone that met Mike would tell you that he was quite special. And of course we would say that, but that is generally, I've not heard a bad word about him. Very modest, cool, young kid. Very different to me in that regard, in that, he wouldn't do things for the recognition of it. Had no interest in being known for being young and doing what he was doing, and ended up just having a real bit of misfortune. At the time it was reported to us that things could have been managed better. There was a court case between the party that were responsible for him at the time and the family, which we eventually lost. We won everything to do with it until the very end, and it was overturned on account of Everest essentially being lawless. There's no law above 8,000 meters. Very difficult to actually get any firm understanding of what happened at that altitude. Having been somewhere near there, I can tell you that it's a very difficult place to exist and be. I was at base camp for 5 weeks. It's you're at altitude and it's a difficult place to be. Lose lots of weight because your body just throws off anything it doesn't need, in order to exist at that height. So Mike summited. It's believed that he had complications with his oxygen. I don't want to. I'm not sat here placing blame on anyone. This is just what we had heard at the time, that some of the oxygen systems weren't functioning as they should be, and that they were in quite short supply. And it's believed that Michael's oxygen wasn't fully operational. Essentially, he looks very uncomfortable in the pictures of him on the summit. Lots of people's summit photos are a celebration of that moment. He looks like he's dying in the pictures. I've always hated the photo of him on the summit in the film. Looks, incredibly uncomfortable. And Michael was known for being a very strong, fit, young climber that, was really good at altitude. So, it was a difficult thing to understand. He was separated from his guide on the way down. The weather turned and he was never seen again. And the guide said 1 minute he was there, 1 minute he wasn't. And that was that, people who know a thing or two about Everest will tell you that, surviving the night on Everest is incredibly rare, although it has happened in a couple of cases. And, anything past that is just wishful thinking. You run out of oxygen and the temperatures aren't survivable. You freeze to death on the side of the mountain and that's that. So, yeah, we tried to recover his body a couple of years ago now. Bear Grylls and I put a team together and we made a film for Disney Plus called Finding Michael, and it was a wonderful experience. That's when I was able to spend weeks kind of processing the death. I've always felt that his death could have been avoided and therefore was somebody else's fault as a kid and growing up. And, on the more turbulent nights where I would drink really heavily, I would get myself into a pretty uncomfortable place at times where I would literally just hate the people who were in charge of that trip. And it took me a while to realize that those feelings are only in my head, that these people 20 years later aren't even thinking about it probably, that essentially I'm just having this dark energy and this kind of turbulent time in my head is just me, right? So it should be addressed. And I was able to kind of do that a lot on the mountain. I was able to not necessarily forgive those individuals, but I was able to just understand that things go wrong on Everest, and that maybe it wasn't maybe it wasn't quite as I shouldn't be as blameful or vengeful as I had been for so many years. So it was kind of, despite the fact that I obviously still believe that things could have happened better, I was able to kind of let go of a fair amount of pain whilst I was on the mountain. I think that comes across in the film. It was quite it was a nice time. I then shot a series called Pilgrimage for the BBC and spoke about it with essentially a bunch of strangers. It was like the third night or something, and that felt good as well. And it wasn't something I ever really spoke about before.
Did you ever, it's so powerful what you're saying there with that, but did you ever almost resent him a little bit for doing it and for putting himself, because obviously everyone knows how dangerous Everest is. Did you ever
It's
resent
a
him
good
bit?
question. No, not really. No, I always saw him as a victim of somebody else's mistake.
Okay.
So I never saw it as his fault.
Yeah.
Or his mistake. And to a degree, I completely still believe that now. It's just I've been able to let go of, and obviously Everest is dangerous. We're not a family that sits here going like, well, this should have been done better and you killed Mike. It's more what we were being told at the time from so many sources was really hard to ignore.
Yeah.
And had Michael slipped and fell in normal conditions, we would never be talking about it. We would never have gone to court. We would never have blamed anybody else for, obviously Everest is difficult. If Michael had, suffered, an issue in the Khumbu Icefall and lost his life, there would be nothing from us as a family. It's just that's we were told, in our opinion, beyond reasonable doubt by many sources that it's these guys' fault. And we were like, okay, well, let's look into it, type thing.
That must have been really hard though, being so young, and because you almost want to hold someone accountable, don't you? I would imagine being that young, you need kind of a black and white, this person did this and was in the wrong because of that.
What I'm about to say is really dark, and I don't think I've said it before, but one of the guys at the time died of cancer, and I was delighted.
Yeah.
which was like, delighted might be a bit strong. I can remember not feeling sorry for him at all. And I can remember thinking,
He was
and I
so
was young at the
young.
time. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say something like that at my age now
No.
with the life that I've had and the experiences that I've had. And it's far too kind of sordid a comment to say now. But I remember at the time as a teenager, a very heavy drinking teenager.
And probably
When
very angry.
When I
teenager.
heard that news, I was like, good, he deserves that.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, you know, I kind of, just to be clear, I wouldn't feel that way
No,
now.
of course
I
not.
just
But
thought
that
I'd
is
share that
such
that's
an
how I felt.
understandable reaction
Yeah.
because there's the death of your brother. There's you kind of need that feeling of someone to blame or
Yeah.
something to blame, and I understand that. In fact I feel like if I were on your end, I would probably even want to seek that vengeance myself. I'd be so angry at them.
I had all kinds of kind of, you know, what now I suppose you would call a manifestation, but, you know, I used to call them daydreams. No, I used to have all kinds of daydreams about like running into these people and what I would do and what I would say and how I'd react. And it's kind of, it's wasted energy, really. Like these guys are just, well, those who are still alive are just getting on with their lives. They probably obviously didn't mean for anything to happen to Mike. You know, they probably don't even see it as their fault, you know, and it's kind of like, it's two sides to every story. You know, maybe it was just an accident and maybe it isn't their fault. On the other hand, you know, maybe it is, but it's kind of, we'll never know. We'll never truly know what happened. I wish we could know what happened. And if we were ever able to find his body, then maybe we would be able to know what happened. But it's all of that's a kind of pipe dream at the moment. Finding a body on Everest is unless you know exactly where it is really difficult.
How do you put all of these thoughts to the side? Like, this is a lot to be going through a mind for so long, since you were 10, Spencer, that all of these feelings, it seems like now you're in a really healthy place, but how do you challenge and juggle with these feelings? A lot of people listening to this will have all kinds of feelings about those that they know that have died. We all know someone. How do you deal with that?
I suppose I'm a more rounded individual now. It's just more about being kind of logical and fair. I think anyone who's spent time on Everest will tell you that accidents happen on Everest. And I guess, I don't know, I'm thinking about it really for the first time. I suppose, you know, shy of them intentionally giving him a oxygen that didn't work, which can never be proved. They probably don't consider this to be, you know, they probably consider it to just be a mishap, and, you know, we'll never be friendly, I don't think, you know, with them. But I think ultimately as well, life goes on. You can choose, in my opinion, you know, how you handle death and grief and people. The beauty of death and grief is that it changes people and it brings stuff out of people that can be really interesting. I see some people who dwell in kind of hell, really, and misery and pain, and I think that's normal for a period, but I do believe that at some point it's really freeing to try and move through that pain and see if you can do something with it. You know, we have with the Michael Matthews Foundation, we've raised a pretty substantial amount of money. We've built many schools and do good and try to change the lives of children in his name, which, you know, is a small thing, but we think that it's meaningful to us, at least, and his name.
No, it doesn't.
It's a small contribution when you look at, you know, global issues, I suppose, but, you know, it's not our position, I don't think, to try and save the world, but, you know, we're doing what we can.
Is there something that you would tell Michael now? Is there something that you would really like to tell him if he were here? What would you say to him?
God, that's a really difficult question. Just that we love him and that we miss him and that he inspires me. And, you know, I live a lot of my life wanting to be more like him, I suppose. My mother like loves us all, but she loved him. Like he was I don't want to say the favorite child because I think I'm the favorite child, right? But like,
You've got to be now, haven't you?
yeah, I think now
You've got to
be. Yeah. No, but like Michael was this really beautiful soul, you know, like, and I'd like to think obviously that we are as well, I suppose, but he was, he guides, you know, some of my thought process, and I find myself talking to him, and obviously we haven't really spoken about some of the events that I've done to try and raise money for the Michael Matthews Foundation, some of these ultra events that I've done. But I want to tell you about this thing that I think is really amazing, and I only learnt about it after experiencing it several times and not really knowing what it was. There have been moments when I'm so depleted and starving and lacking water and lacking sleep on day 4 of, you know, 5-day event where, you know, you're running low on everything and you've lost kilos after kilos, and you're in a state where it's very difficult to describe, but part of it is really beautiful, and you might look around and you might feel an overwhelming sense of kind of not being on your own, even though you are. And there may be a beautiful sunset or sunrise or something, or a gust of wind that feels misplaced or something like that. And you kind of feel like looked after in the moment, like where you had felt like giving up was the only option. There's something keeping you going. And I later came to learn that, well, for me, that is something called thin space. And thin space is said to be those moments between earth and heaven. So that thin space between kind of the afterlife and where we are now, if you believe in such things. To some people, it's just a beautiful sunrise or sunset or something breathtakingly beautiful that they haven't seen before, or that moment where you're thinking about somebody and they call you, or you know, or whatever. Just a moment that feels unusual, you know, but something that feels out of place. And when I do these ultras and what I have coming up, I'm going to be in that thin space for hours, if not days. And in that, I feel really close to him. Like, you know, I was telling you about how I kind of feel like I communicate with him and with Vogue. He's kind of weirdly just with me in that space. And I never knew about thin space when I was experiencing all this stuff. And it's probably what gets me going back to the ultras, because I can tell you, you know, they're mostly just really painful. Like, they're not that fun. And it's kind of, you know, you find yourself in these really horrendous times and moments where giving up feels like the only option, and it's exhausting and it's painful and it's hard and it's, you know, and then you kind of get to the end and you go, oh, fuck it, I'm never doing that again. And then, of course, time passes and you go like, actually, I love that thing. I loved it. I loved it. And you kind of, a day might go by and you feel this like remarkable sense of achievement where anything's possible, and gives you a whole new look on a bunch of stuff maybe that was perhaps confusing before you went and did it. And all of a sudden you kind of grow and you feel differently about certain things, and you go, actually, I'd love to do that again. And it's, for me, it's because of that connection to Mike, I think.
That's so interesting, though, the fact that it's almost because of him that you're doing this. I've heard of thin places, but I've never heard of thin spaces. That's so...
Who was it who told me? It was a priest who told me about thin space. Again, when we were doing the North Wales pilgrimage way.
Of course, you
famous
were.
pilgrimage.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Yeah,
North Wales
where?
Yeah.
We went. Yeah.
What,
So
pilgriming for
we did a pilgrimage.
This was the BBC series. wasn't
Yeah.
it?
So it's
who's the pilgrimage in North Wales? I'm just sorry.
It's about, we're doing the Camino de
Camino de
yeah.
Santo.
But
it's not like
yeah.
a
That one's, like,
religious...
that's quite a famous one.
Yeah.
So there are actually pilgrim routes all over the place.
Yeah.
You just kind of don't know about them because, you know, it's a kind of, for something that's so old and so much tradition, it feels like a very new thing, doesn't it? For people who are suddenly going on.
All I can
Loads of
imagine you
Just
guys
for
being
us.
about 10 miles ahead of everyone, though.
Yeah.
Just like not taking it slow and just running off.
We
On the
did,
pilgrimage.
there was a bit of that, yeah. But no, we met this really incredible priest who was just so lovely, who was telling us all about these 16th century saints. I think she was talking about Saint Winifred, who has a remarkable story, perhaps for a different day. And she was telling us about thin space, and we sat for a period of time. We found something called a ponder spot, where we were just able to focus on something that we wanted to think about. And I was thinking about Mike and Vogue again. And she was explaining, it was really beautiful where we were on top of this mountain, and she was talking about thin space and feeling thin space. And at the end, when we were at Bardsey Island, which is a very spiritual, religious part of North Wales, it's where the pilgrimage ends. You have to take a boat. We weren't able to take the boat, but Bardsey Island is where, I think I'll probably get this wrong, but I think they're said to be 20,000 saints buried there.
Wow.
That's the pilgrimage route now. And now I
Sure,
get why there's
sure.
a pilgrimage
Yeah.
route to the saints.
I'm sure I don't know if there are 20,000 saints buried there, but that's the story, and it's said to be, you know, an incredibly spiritual, religious place to be, and no electricity and no nothing. You know, it's just basically a big graveyard of saints.
Nice.
You can still become a saint, apparently, which I didn't know.
How?
You have to prove 3 miracles,
Okay.
which, you know,
It's a bit
kids
difficult.
don't cut it apparently either. and then
You've tried.
yeah, I did apply. and then the Pope has to. You have to prove 3 miracles, and then the Pope has to sign it off.
But you have
Basically,
to
to verify
die
it.
in the middle as well, though. You can't be. You
I-
can't, be a
you
can't
saint
live a
still
long
alive.
life.
I do believe that typically it is a
You're
post-mortem
It's
thing as well. Yeah, so death is also a part of that. Yeah,
hey.
yeah. So no, Saint Matthew's is not something I'll experience, I'm afraid.
Do you think that, obviously you've talked about kind of your issues with sort of addiction and alcoholism and things. Do you think in any way, correct me if I'm wrong, the kind of fierce exercise challenges that you take on, do you almost think there might be a way that you're kind of substituting that for the alcohol and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so, but I think that's great.
Yeah, definitely.
So like, I find it really strange when people mean that as an insult.
no,
'cause
I
you- no,
don't.
no,
I
I
think
know,
that's
I know, I
I would
wasn't-
love to get to that point.
I wasn't saying that
No,
you
no,
do,
yeah.
but you get that. I get that on social media. People going like, "Oh, well, you're just replacing being an alcoholic with, you know, some fitness freak," and it's like,
It's like, and what?
well,
Of course I am.
well, yeah, one's excellent for you
Yeah.
and one's really shit for you. So
Yeah.
like,
It's
isn't
just
that?
coping, isn't it?
It's a nice substitute,
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, work, family, fitness, health. I think it's worth exploring the health and fitness thing.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you don't lift weights, or you don't have a hobby that involves you know, having an elevated heart rate for a period of time, exercise, it's really life-changing stuff. You know,
Yeah.
I've had long periods in my life where I haven't done any training of any kind, and where running a kilometer would have proved really difficult, and by my standards I was, you know, very overweight and not particularly happy with you know, the way I looked or felt, and having a much cleaner diet and a much better relationship with alcohol and training regularly is completely transformative. And I think it's that would be my number one piece of advice to anyone, period, just full stop. The you know, if you're not the kind of person that exercises, or, you know, I'm sure my producer won't mind me saying, you know, for Big Fish, she doesn't exercise at all. She just doesn't like it. Lots of people I know don't exercise. And I just think even if you get out and just walk, you know, in a park or something, just for 20 minutes, half an hour, that excuse of I don't have time is just bollocks. Like, if you're one of those people that says you don't have time to train, everybody has time to train. I'm a pretty good example of someone that has 4, I I feel bad calling it 4 jobs because it sounds like I'm
No,
kind of
it
like a
is.
single
Jobs though, aren't they?
They're good jobs. They're good jobs. But like, I have 4 things, I suppose, that could be considered a full-time job on their own, right? That I constantly am
And you still
doing.
manage to-
I have 3 children. I have 2 dogs. You know, they need caring for. They all have to be walked to school. The dogs need walking. You know, like, I'm not saying I'm the busiest bloke in the world because I definitely can take time, but I'm finding time to train for 30 marathons in 30 days, which has involved running over 2,000 kilometers in preparation for it in my spare time, right? So, you know, I think we can, even if you work a desk job like I used to in the city in finance, where I had to be at my desk at 6 and I leave at 5 p.m., you know, go for a run in your lunch break or after work or in the morning really early. Like, it's a good way to start your day.
And as well, I like, even if you genuinely have found 1,000,001 reasons not to be fit, you can just, it's not even necessarily a fitness thing, but for me, if I've got a particularly busy day coming up or I just can't build the gym, when I'm in the shower, because we've all got to have a shower, I just turn it to cold.
Cold
and
shower.
then
I
stand
like a
there in a
cold
minute,
shower.
stand there a
Yeah.
couple of minutes,
So
and I
good.
feel alive.
Yeah.
It's so
like
good.
it's
It's a rush.
so brilliant.
It's so good.
And it helps me so much.
It's
Yeah.
so good.
But-
But there's scientific, there's no,
Shout out the cold showers, but we've briefly touched on throughout the past half an hour or so your ridiculous fitness abilities, and I know you speak about how being fit can really help people going out and just going for a run or whatever. You do take it to the next level, Spencer. People don't have to do the ridiculous challenges you've done, but you've got something incredible coming up. I think we should spend a bit of time actually speaking about that. Perhaps selfishly, because I'm so interested. But
Oh,
you've
thanks.
got a history of Marathon des Sables,
Marathon des Sables.
Oui, okay.
If we're being
Merci.
pedantic.
Which, to those that don't know, is running an outrageous length through a desert. You've run through jungles, all these different things. Just tell us about what's coming up.
Yeah, so the Marathon des Sables is quite a good place to link it. So the Marathon des Sables is 250 kilometers. Sometimes it ends up being slightly less. So it's between 230 and 250 kilometers, which is roughly 6 marathons over 5 days in the Sahara Desert. And it's pretty unforgiving. And the course is kind of designed in what I would call a relatively sadistic way. It's not kind, you know, it's lots of soft sand, lots of dunes. You're running during the day, so you can't control when you run. So you start at 9, I think, roughly 8, 9. Some of these days take 12 hours to complete. So you're running, you know, in that 40, 45 degree midday sun, which is a difficult thing to contend with. Particularly when you got, you know, between 1.5 and 3 liters of water every 10 kilometers, basically, because you carry all. It's self-sufficient. That's its catchphrase, or whatever you want to call it, slogan, is the world's toughest foot race. So that's generally known to be.
It sounds like self-abuse, though.
It's rough. I did that in 2021 in October. It was the hottest one on record because it was in October. It's supposed to be in March, April, but because of COVID, it was moved, and unfortunately, a couple of people died. It was a really rough experience for a lot of people. I'm doing. So the Great Desert Challenge is what we're calling my. It'll be a world first, a world record if successful. Is 30 marathons in 30 days in the Jordanian desert, which is I've just got back from a recce in Jordan. It's alarmingly similar to the Marathon des Sables. So it's I'd go so far as to call the terrain identical. Right, it's very similar. Looser sand where we are. Less flat, harder, compact sand than the Marathon des Sables, and a far lonelier experience, obviously, because there's typically about 1,000 people do the Marathon des Sables. There was 800 my year, only 250 finished. So I'm solo running this. So I'm alone, which will make quite a big difference. Marathon des Sables is it's lovely that you get to just run up to people and have conversations and like have that camaraderie of the whole experience. this is going to be quite a lot rougher for the mind.
Yeah, it's going to be a mental challenge, that, being on your own.
It's five Marathon des Sables back to back, essentially. So it's 1,266 kilometers, and it's 30 subsequent marathons in 30 days. And I'm doing it alone. I'll be supported, which is quite a big difference. So that is a big positive. I don't have to carry my own food or water. So I won't have a 10 kilo backpack on my back, like severing my shoulders. So that's going to make a massive difference to pace and timings. But I will be alone. Got a running coach there, alone covering the full distance. What I mean, I will have people joining and running some chunks of it. But yeah, I was just there. It was 48 degrees during the day. And it's pretty rough. I did one 32 kilometer test run, and I basically lost my lower lip, like completely nuked my lower lip. Was quite, like, I recovered quite quickly from the run, but it was quite it was fairly eye-opening. I was expecting the route that we chose to be harder, flatter. So it's going to be much tougher than I thought it would be, but it's going to be one of those one day at a time things where you can't allow your head to wander into I've got 29 left of these things to do, because it's just going to be, it's either going to be the most outrageously difficult thing I've ever, done, or I'm going to find some rhythm quite early, and it's just going to be a long, slow thing that's manageable. I really don't know, and it's causing me some discomfort.
Okay.
Why is it that you're doing this? What is making you want to?
So this particular thing is for Global's Make Some Noise. I quietly would like to raise £1 million for kids, for charity. $1 million's a huge target, by the way. So I'd be delighted with half of that. But I like having huge. Yeah, that's my goal. It's not their goal, FYI.
You're not going to do this, Spencer.
Yeah. They were like, I think we should aim for 400,000 at them. I was like, no, we're doing $1 million.
But surely there are easier things you can do to raise money. This is like, why do you want to push yourself to do something that is so difficult? What is it that's driving you?
So many people keep asking me why, and to be honest, it's a bit of a why not for me.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that I will have fun with this, as well as it being really rough. In fact, I interviewed 2 incredible people the other day, both of whose advice was try your best to make it fun. Yeah. Have big banging loud tunes that you love. Try and turn it into a bit of a desert festival. Enjoy yourself, have fun. Because actually, if you don't, you're done.
Yeah.
And it's I interviewed Jasmine Paris, who's the first woman, the only woman ever to complete the Barkley Marathons.
Amazing. It's a great documentary on that, isn't it?
It's insane, that thing, and for her to do it has opened the door for so many more incredible people to go and have a go at that, I think. But
she's amazing.
But kind of standing back, I can't help but draw parallels between your adventurous spirit and your brother's adventurous spirit. Yeah. Do you think there is anything in that? And your mum must just hate you.
Yeah. No, mum is worried. Mum's worried. Dad less so. I mean, Dad's a bit of a lot. Dad, I don't know.
What about Vogue? I'm sure she's.
Everyone's worried, right? Yeah. But it's kind of I can't stress enough that I'm supported in this effort. In the Marathon des Sables, if you have complications or dehydration, you can be on your own for hours, right? Like there was a day I came 33rd in the 82.5 kilometer day, which was day 4, and because the day is so spread out, because it's 82 kilometers is a huge distance to cover in the deserts. People are going really slowly, so the field is really split, right? So I had probably 8, 9, 10 hours of that day on my own, completely on my own. So if you have a problem, there's no one there to help you, right? Like I'm literally running behind a car this time that has a doctor in the car, and they have my cold water, my ice, my nutrition, my
It's still not easy.
But just like, I'd go so far as to say that obviously this is going to be much harder than the Marathon des Sables, but I'm supported. So if there is an issue, my medics will spot it before if I start swaying or start being very dehydrated, or even if my core body temperature raises to a level where it really shouldn't be,
They'll know.
there's data. I'm wearing devices that are going to tell, people in the car, like, get him to slow down, give him, a shitload of carbs, like sit him down, put an umbrella over him, get him cool. You don't have any of that luxury, essentially, when you're doing these other things. Obviously, this is much longer, much harder, much more of an achievement, in my opinion. But, I'm being very closely managed. And, we've had to raise, big point. If you're kind enough to contribute to this fundraising effort, I just want to let you know that 100% of your donations go to charity and to Global's Make Some Noise. Nothing at all goes to the race, right? So I have brought on brands separately to the fundraising to fund the pretty expensive race efforts, and the doctors and nutrition and all that stuff is a completely separate pot to where your money's going to go. So if you're kind enough to donate, you can go to makesomenoise.com. There's a link in my bio as well on Instagram.
And we'll have a link on the podcast
episode as well. That's beautiful. Thanks so much. But yeah, just because I'm getting a lot of messages saying, like, surely this race is quite an expensive thing to put on. Does my money go towards that? And the answer is absolutely not. Children will see the benefit 100%. of your donation.
That's brilliant.
And that money you're raising is going to help so many people. We will put a link in our bio as well. I think it's incredible what you're doing, and the amazing things, unbelievable. But can I ask you one final question, just in the interest of time, because you've probably got to do another marathon of training or something.
Got to run home.
But what advice would you give to 10-year-old you after all of this you've been through, after the amazing journeys that you're doing, everything you're kind of going through? What advice would you give to 10-year-old you who's just found out such awful news?
I try to live life without regret, but that's quite difficult to do, right? And you get so many people who go, I live without regret. It's like, well, I don't think it's possible to fully live without regret. Obviously, there are things in your life that you'd like to change, and you can see it however you want to see it. But there has to be, in my opinion, an element. Whether or not you dwell in it and allow it to affect your mindset is one thing, and I don't allow it to affect my mindset. But I would change several things about my life. I would change my relationship that I had with alcohol. I would make it very clear to my younger self that seeking attention in that way and being the loudest and funniest and, the latest to stay up and, the most active on the social scene is kind of meaningless. And if it came from me, I might perhaps listen to myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, if it comes from your parents, you're not going to listen to them. If it comes from your brother, you're not going to listen to them. So I would make it very clear that the time that I wasted, in my opinion, going out and just nuking myself like 6 times a week, is time that could have been better spent. And I do regret it. I regret some elements of Made in Chelsea, like how long I stuck around on Made in Chelsea. I don't hate the show, obviously, or how it came about, because it was a really cool thing, in my opinion, to have done, because it was really original and it was new and it was fresh, and it was, when you didn't know what was coming in the scene, it was kind of cool. When it became really produced and, in my opinion, very fake, it became more boring. And I kind of hate the person that I became on the show. I mistook playing up to that kind of bad boy character as being really cool, because I was too young to kind of understand its implication and the effects that it might have on people's perception of me, right? Like, it was my opinion that if you were really nice and really kind, and you just wouldn't get the airtime, and it wouldn't, you weren't doing your job, essentially, is what I would believe at the time. So I don't know. I despise people knowing me for that show. It really it annoys me, and it shouldn't annoy me. But that would be I would maybe tell myself, do it, but stick around for 2 seasons. not 10.
Well, maybe people are going to get to know you as the adventurer and all of those things. Well, thank you so much, Spencer, for joining us, and good luck with your journey. Bloody hell, I don't know if good luck's the right words.
Just keep going. Just keep swimming, in the words of Dory. I don't know.
Yeah, lovely, Dory. Well, thanks so much. Hey, listen, if we're successful, I'll pop back in and tell you all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love that.
Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.